Right. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad
It's
to be
great to
here.
see you.
Great to see you too.
You're a brave girl.
Thank you.
So, how did the story start?
The original story was back to 2004, where I sent a book to Neil Peart of the band Rush, and within a week, my whole home, my computer, everything in my house was tagged, and I was tagged with a communication system, which was based on covert technology and synthetic telepathy. And
Why? What led to that?
I would say for experimentation purposes mainly. After all the programs they ran me through, it seemed to me like they were just running a battery of tests to see where I was at. And so far as synthetic telepathy, remote viewing, pattern recognition, and some of the things that they did, where they programmed me into seeing colors, numbers, codes. And literally, I was a walking spy bird and was trained as such by my handler at that time. So,
Now, why should they do that? Let's spin back to how this started and how you got into the relevant programs and what led you to even being noticed.
okay, I think what led me to be noticed was I had correspondence with Neil Peart in the past, way back in the 80s. Just a normal communication where he would send me a postcard if I would send something to him. So I have a sense that that was part of it. But also, at the time they inducted me, my electromagnetic field in my light body was amped up into my Merkaba, which was very recognizable if anybody was doing a flyby or remote scanning. So when you have an enhancement in your psychic abilities and you're already amped up, that gives them kind of a green light insofar as more interest in how that goes. So I was tagged, I sense, due to that ability. And once they tagged my own signal, they interfaced it onto their communication system where it would bounce around to music on radios and any type of interaction sounds, frequencies, voice patterns, you name it.
Now, what led to you? What led to your interest in even discussing the terms macabre? Did you have any experiences when you were young?
Yeah, well, actually, I've always been very psychic as a child. Grew up knowing and seeing things ahead of time, very advanced, and reading when I was like 4 years old. But the Merkaba and my spiritual lifestyle just kept growing and evolving as I was growing up. So I wound up doing psychic readings for people, healing work, and I started getting into ascension work, which was based on DNA activation and activating certain keys and codes within the body to enhance the abilities of an individual. So that's where my spiritual
Now,
side.
something which we've noticed here in Britain is that people with certain blood groups are being specifically targeted by certain organizations. I don't want to say too much, uh, but they're organizations a lot of people would treat every day as the most trustworthy people. What do you think? Do you have any special qualities in that regard which would heighten you on the radar?
Probably. Yeah, I look back on my mother's side of the family, and yeah, there's a lot of royalty with Scotland, Ireland, France. Yeah, definitely.
Now
Definitely
that's
we
a
have a
big
blood.
signal. That's a big.
Yeah,
And in
yeah.
what way? I mean, the reason why I say that because we've interviewed at the Amash project a guy called John Shelton, and he has very similar qualities. And he actually used to work for the British Ministry of Defence, but it was the health service that targeted him. And we found that they seem to be after certain people, specifically anybody who can telepath or do anything like that. So, what about your story?
That's the same thing. I mean, insofar as I was at a level of consciousness where it was easy for them to tag my electromagnetic field and tag and map my neural circuitry and then interface it onto a communication system in an underground area, which is literally covert technology. And it was integrated into other departments, other black operations departments as well. So yeah, they were mapping everything from my vitals, brainwave activity, you name it, and interfacing that onto their communication system. So I do get that there is a certain level of consciousness they're looking at, a certain development of physical, mental, spiritual. Also, I'm a black belt and a martial artist, and I taught martial arts right before I was inducted. I was teaching martial arts class, and that's a very grounding, empowering type of thing to do. So I couldn't get derailed very easily by these guys. They really tried to screw me up and program me, and I broke orbit with the programming. So
Now, you said an awful lot of complicated things there, tagging your electromagnetic field or your bioelectric field and things. A, how do they know? And B, how do they tag it?
they tag it to the satellite-driven technology. Insofar as how they know it's a measuring thing. They can map the electromagnetic field, and when I say they map it, they're using the technology to map at the body system. So that's neural circuitry, brainwave activity, vibratory rate, you name it, whatever you're emanating, they can map. And that does include the brainwave
Now,
activity as
if
well.
you're coming out with a lot of very brilliant terms here, and because of the Skype, we need to try and speak a little bit slower, uh,
Okay.
because what
Hard
happens is
times.
the sound can gate a little bit, and then we can lose a couple of words. Uh,
Okay.
but that's a whack of stuff you just said there. So let's just go back to so that people who aren't familiar with this can understand the terms. And for instance, if somebody has got these abilities and they're finding terrible things happening to them, they can understand it in each stage. Now, you started to enhance your own abilities, and then what happened to the tagging? How did this? How did they notice you? And how do you? Well, let's. I'm guilty of the same thing. Let's get one thing straight. How do we get tagged? What? How do we get noticed? And you mentioned about how they tap into the communication system. Because this is very interesting from my point of view, because this is something which we discovered as a pirate radio broadcaster. We were completely independent, but we noticed that there were very important factors which I don't want to go into my story. I want to hear from your story, but there were very important factors involving very strange, intelligent black fluidic energies. But let's, and I noticed James Casbolt has mentioned stuff that he can see coming out of the transmitters, and we shared that ability. So what? How do they tag you?
When they
Why?
tag
No.
me,
Why
I'm
should
speaking.
they tag you? What specifically in your EM field or your biofield or whatever you want to call it is what the problem?
Okay. But my sense is, and this is my own take on the induction itself, was my Mutaba, which is my light body has shifted into a multidimensional space of consciousness, which is a very powerful signature universal celestial heartbeat and pulse. And this pulse merges with the universal energies. So it is my sense that they were intrigued by that and they tagged the system.
Now,
That's what
who's
drew them.
they and how did they
They
find out?
They originally was the parties of Rush. And I know it sounds very out there, but Neil Peart, Michael J. Mosbach was a personal handler. The members of Rush were involved in the initial tagging and induction in my house, which was satellite driven. And had it not been for me sending my book to Neil Peart, I would not have been inducted. I know that.
Now,
Later on,
sorry.
oh,
Why does a rock band get involved with this stuff? Surely they're just guys who go out and play great music and away you go.
well, they're musicians second, and covert technology is probably first for them. But insofar as Neil Peart goes, if you do any type of real investigations on him, you'll notice that he's been involved in signals covert technology for a very long time. And one thing about synthetic telepathy is that they use it for their surveillance, they use it for protection. Michael J. Mosbach was hearing and listening through synthetic telepathy interface with Neil Peart, and that's the covert hearing system. That's a special hearing they have for listening without headsets, basically. So it's an enhanced form of telepathy without the wires and the headset.
So how do they listen in? Have they been enhanced or are they non-humans to start with?
I would say they've been enhanced. It's possible they're hybrids, but I would say they've been enhanced. They've been involved in the covert aspects of the technology for a very long time. And when I talked to Michael J. Mosbach in person on Maui, and I asked him if he had had a hearing like mine, he admitted he did. So we
Now
have an
you're
inside.
talking about being able to, for instance, hear. Sorry, see, there's a lot of concepts here which I think we really need to explain. If you're hearing something, are you talking about a number of the people in the Amash project have heard it was so they could hear taxis 5 miles away and hearing which is incredibly pristine and with tremendous abilities. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's a covert communication system that no one else can hear but you and your handler or anybody actually hacked in or hijacked onto the communication system.
In
So
what
that
way? How does that work? Is it what frequencies, what wave bands are we talking about?
frequencies myself because I'm trying to decode everything. It's more than a scalar wave and it works a lot with 0 point energy. That I know. It's not just a regular Mach radio signal. However,
Now, for instance,
it's
a scalar wave is an acoustic wave. So you're talking about waves which are above normal human hearing.
but it's beyond that. It's more like a 0 point. I know that because I've been kind of researching different kinds of waves of the technology itself. But I do know that map brainwaves to such an extent that it interfaces it onto their communication system where it's almost creating its own
You see,
copy of the holographic mind.
now that's really interesting because some of the first uses of the transatlantic satellite communication system was the transmission of brainwaves. And the brainwaves were being transmitted from England to the States, and then whatever something was happening to them, and then they were sending them back.
Yeah, I keep thinking Tesla comes to that, but yeah, that's we all advanced beings, and we are able to telepathically connect into others. We all have that ability. They enhance it through their communication system. Unfortunately, they're misusing the technology, and they're using it for programming people
Yeah. Now,
for
now
MK.
what I want to find out is what is the technology and how does it work? Can we work on that initially?
Well, I've been working on it for years now, and I've written a few books, but
Okay. Well,
literally, I know.
let's talk about the books. Let's talk about how people can understand and find out about this.
Well, I have a couple books out. The first one was put out in 2008, and that's called Eye of the Remote: Black Operations in Areas Beyond 52. And
And can
that
we
book
get
covers
those on Amazon and things?
on Amazon.com and also my publisher as well, which is Author House Books. But it covers the induction itself. It covers the technology. It covers what I went through as a lab rat and a test pilot for their technology. And it just kind of goes over parallels between spirit and what their version of what they're trying to do to control and manipulate the source energy, which is your spiritual design. So it covers a lot of different things from a spiritual level to a covert technology level. And then I also have my recent book out, which is Programmed by Deception, and that's the series. I just released that, and that was on MK Ultra. It's basically on how everything has been a false reality and a lie, and that every piece of data, including words and languages, have been used to control and manipulate the masses.
Great. Now, the thing we want to understand is how did you get in the lab to start with? How did this story start? How did you get plugged into the system in the first place?
And that's what happened when I submitted my book, Transmutation Through Ascension, to Neil Peart back in 2004. And it was through that experience, through sending him the book, that put under surveillance and eventually tagged and inducted into their covert program.
Okay, now how do they physically tag you? Is it something that's physically done to you or in an implant or something?
Absolutely, it's a satellite-driven technology, but they tag your electromagnetic field. They tag your electromagnetic field, but they also are using a type of zero-point transmission, I'm pretty sure, to create certain signals and signatures within the body. It goes beyond a regular implant. And when I talk about my Merkaba, my signal, I had a natural Merkaba signal when I meditate, and it pulses by itself. They use that. They tag cavity. I remember when it happened, and now to a communication system where it bounces to music on radios, it interacts. It's almost like a symbiotic communication with anything that makes a noise or a sound. I've had that for 10 years almost. So, and they're measured. These
So,
have
in
been
other
measured.
words, they're just listening for your signal, your frequency, and your frequency codec.
Right. Yeah. At the same time, it feels like they've also modified it, which really doesn't make me feel real good. So I've been to some extent, and that still coming to terms with what exactly that entails. Doing a lot of research in my own design to try to figure that out. So.
So, how do they? In what way is this system working? There must be tagging and looking at millions of people.
Right.
Have you been able to follow? Have you been able to follow back where they're tagging you to? Have you been able to travel? Can you see what's tagging? What's actually back there? What computer system or whatever's involved there?
When I first got tagged, yes, I saw things that were like simulation rooms. And I also saw something that looked like a shiny black metallic helicopter. It wasn't a helicopter, but it resembled something of that nature, like a simulation type room where it was over my right shoulder. There were propulsion sounds. And also I saw the live agents, live feed, and visuals and things like that, like converting everything to codes and numbers. I was writing in codes and numbers of things. And pattern recognition to have me trained for colors. So in other words, for example, I could walk into a room and say the room, they want me to find blue. I wouldn't even know where the colors are on any level of my psyche. And I would I could turn around the room and find every target. And that programming, that modifications and things.
Now, a couple of the words dropped out there. In what kind of programming was that
I would
exactly?
consider more of a combat type programming or something pertaining to covert military, just by the way it was. It seemed to me like a fighter pilot technology or something you would use as a fighter pilot. Being able to numbers is very important. And, it's
Now, what's
just,
very important, sorry, I have to, because of the Skype, we're losing some words. It's
okay.
the way that it drops out sometimes. So, for instance, I got the very important and the numbers, but what it seems that is this some kind of telepathic mind to instrumentation technology?
Correct. Yes, I do believe that. Even though I was used as a spy bird, but I was their remote spy bird. In other words, I was their eyes and ears, and I was walking around being trained and programmed by them. But what I do know with the symbiotic relationship between whatever they tagged inside of me, and I'm really clear that you can remotely pilot ships with that. I'm really clear that you can remotely pilot a lot of things with that type of telepathy. So what they have done to me was try to control and manipulate me more with a frequency fence. They didn't want me having control. And they went out of their way to really keep me contained energetically on some levels and just program me until
Now,
I just
this was happening to you involuntarily.
wrecked. Yeah, I was inducted in 2004. And, when I
How were
first
you inducted?
the satellite tracking communication system. And originally, it hit me in my bedroom at night. And that's when I felt all these weird energies that some were sexually oriented. And when they tag you, I could start to hear the communication system. I started to hear the handler. And then eventually, it kicked in full speed where I was hearing dialogue and then I was learning the dialogue. It was just, um, it's
Are these voices in your head?
opening up a communications channel. This is not a voice like, voices. These are real people passing the electromagnetic field and opening up a communication system with a live agent in real time. And that's the part where then the handler they put you in a kind of euphoric space where it feels like you're on drugs of some kind. It's not like, so this is like,
It's not like what?
it's like, in other
Oh,
words,
I missed that. Sorry.
yeah,
It's not
it,
like what?
it's not like a real drug. It's a euphoric kind of frequency transmission drug space of consciousness. And I remember feeling like I was drugged when it was a very euphoric space. It was a very, I just felt it was down. My shields were all down and they were just completely infiltrating.
And how did you experience that? What does that actually feel like?
It feels, at first it felt like I was shot out of a cannon. It feels like an atomic split in every cell and atom of your body. Your vibration goes real high. And I saw a lot of different things, but it was just very intense. I almost felt like my body was shaking. It was that much power and that much energy transmitting. And then it settles in. But when they tagged my chest cavity, that was uncomfortable. I felt the pain as they opened up I mean, when they tagged, it felt like a rip and a tear, and I could actually feel like pressure and uncomfortable, like surgery that was done more satellite oriented. And I remember that very clearly. I remember that night.
Now, the thing about satellites is that they're way up in the sky and they fly around at a tremendous speed. Uh, is there another way they were not doing this? I mean, like a non-local form of induced psychotronics of some kind?
You can have, there is a version where you can hang out with, your vans and things like that and use certain radio frequencies to harass a target with psychotronic harassment and stalking. But I know this was satellite driven. I'm real clear it was satellite driven. And they do have black satellites. And even what we think we know about the technology of satellites is nothing compared to what they've been experimenting with. It's not the electromagnetic field remotely. It's nothing to tap into your home and view things and see things with these type of satellites. And we won't see them for years.
I mean, are we talking? I'm thinking of some kind of virtual matrix or field of some kind.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Holographic.
So they set up a matrix grid of some kind, and then they use that grid to action and connect with.
Right. On the operator's end, I would say that's correct. Yeah. And unfortunately, I wasn't in the operator's room. I had visuals of things here and there, but I'm pretty sure that you're correct about that. Yeah.
Now, what I'm still trying to figure out is why you and how did I mean I mean, you've come up with an awful lot of stuff very quickly there. But I'm still trying to find out. You're walking down the street one day, and you're just happy, and then you write a book about something, and then bingo, you're tagged.
right? Yeah. I, literally, I'm not sure, other than the fact that obviously they found me to be a good candidate for this technology, and it worked, and I can make it
And
work,
how did
which
they verify that? How did they select and then test and verify?
verify it. They would use we would pass information back and forth where no one else could hear it, and Mossbach was the handler in that, so he received all the data, and it was confirmed
How did
insofar as
he
this.
receive the data, and how did you send it to him?
I sent it through emails, but originally, before that, when we first started communicating, it was just typing on a blank screen, and the
What
emails
do you mean
came
by
back.
typing on a blank screen? You mean you weren't putting letters on the screen?
I can type, yeah, yeah, on a
Sorry, say that again. It dropped out.
I was typing on the keyboard. Say the screen is just white, and I'm using it just to type, and then I'm going to erase. That's pretty much what I was doing. However, they have the covert access where they're behind the screen, and they're
They're
able
key
to
logging.
very much so. So basically, I would, and he would, we would talk. We were in telepathy, and we were confirming that. So that conversation got started, and then it just went beyond remote, kind of remotely controlled to some extent, and piloting and seeing as a spy bird and things like that.
So is this some kind of device where I mean I was reading something with one of Colonel Tom Bearden's books where they're sending out virtual subspace engines which the mind then activates and brings into a cognitive reality. Is that something like that where it's all in a subspace domain,
It sounds
or would you call that 0 point?
that, but I'm correct about that. Yeah, I mean, it definitely level. I
Oh,
mean, it's
we're having trouble here with the audio. It's dropping out quite a lot. I think. Do you want to just push your mic a little bit further away,
this
just
way.
so it doesn't get the puffs?
Can you hear me this way, down
Yeah,
or up?
yeah, that's great. Because it's great. Well, I really want to hear what you're saying. It's fantastic. Okay, we can continue.
Where was I? Okay, where are we?
We're talking about how the computers are being used. I mean, you're looking at a blank screen. You're having some kind of telepathic contact with somebody at the other end. I'm trying to understand how that works as a mechanism, and I'm trying to understand the mechanism of how this is working.
And to me, it was the technology that opened up the communication where I could hear my handler live feed in real time. And there were keywords that they would use for me, which is live feed, have energy, read energy, they would say. And they would use little things to trigger and open up a communication even further. But that technology behind it, and it's based on the setting up a communication system.
That's the satellite communication system.
Yeah. Okay, well, when I was tagged in my bedroom, when they opened up the communication system with the live agent, that was based on synthetic telepathy, which means I was hearing and listening live feed in real time. When I would go to sit at my computer, which sometimes they would have me do, I would type out a sentence and they would respond telepathically. But they wanted me, I think they needed to confirm me actually typing on the computer so that it could have a little more clarity with that. But words that they said to me were actually used later on and were confirmed in an album that was being recorded at the same time that I was inducted, just to give you an idea.
That was the band Rush. Is that
Correct.
how did they connect with the synthetic telepathy to start with?
It's the same technology. I basically the same way I did. I imagine they were tagged the same way I was to some extent. I have a strong sense Neil Peart's totally loaded up with implants and signals, and I do know he's been involved in signals intelligence, which if anybody looks at that, that's covert MK Ultra based technology.
Okay,
So I've done my research,
the
and
good old MK Ultra. What is MK Ultra?
well, it's a program designed to control and manipulate a target into doing something, whether it be assassinations, personal security and
What's the difference
surveillance.
between MK Ultra and the Monarch program?
Um, I don't think there's really much difference, and so far as just maybe eras, different ages, and different decades of things. But honestly, it's really just a parallel of another one. They're still using it to control and manipulate a target, depending on what they want to do with that person. They have women that are prostitutes, and they want to make them whatever, personal escorts. I think I'm not sure what they had in mind for me, but I do know they trained me on a lot of different levels. And they use a lot of sexual assaults on me to kind of lull me into a different euphoric space as well. So,
Now, what sort of levels?
okay,
You
as
mentioned a
in,
number of levels. Can you describe those levels and and detail them?
okay, well, and I mean, for me, I would say you go through the different levels. What I was talking about, the earlier projects of MK Ultra and Monarch and all these other programs. What they have now is more based on what I think is just a black ops synthetic telepathy project where you're being programmed on a very high level of consciousness to interface with all sorts of different things, but you're also being acclimated to radio frequencies and things that would normally probably make you sick. It reminds me of the Super Soldier program, actually, to some extent, because I think they're creating more warlike warriors, and they're creating a different breed and something that's a little more resistant and not as fragile as the earlier programming with MK Ultra and Monarch and things like that. I've known a lot of people who were Monarch, and they're very fragile.
In what
So,
way
and
are they fragile?
I would say like children, they've been broken down to some extent that they have alters that are based on a childlike, very sensitive and insecure side to them.
You
And
s-
I've seen that surface on some of the targets. And I do know from one person who was a Monarch boy, he actually committed suicide. He couldn't handle it. So, yeah, I mean, I was able to override a lot of their programming and conditioning. I kept ascending out of it, but I still have things that run that are programs, like the pattern recognition numbers and codes are very big for me.
And what kind of pattern recognition and codes are you talking about?
Well, for the
Are you
most part,
talking
like
three-dimensional things which extend out into four or five dimensions?
correct, it can go on many multidimensional levels. But the one thing I remember was like almost speed reading all the time. Like I would look at something and it would be super fast reading, and then I would look at a word, say the word "the," and you're going down a book and a paragraph, and I could locate the "the" without even knowing the book. I would just say boom, 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 boom. I mean, letters A, boom, boom, boom. It's like that. That kind of a targeting where letters and numbers are very significant and colors are very significant. Patterns, if it's a certain design, I would know exactly where to look to match that design in another room or just instantaneously. I mean, these are things that I wouldn't have to be in the room or even in advance to know about. So it's an interesting
How would you be
program.
given the initial design?
I suspect it must have been subconscious because honestly, I don't remember them programming me. That's the thing. I don't remember them programming me for colors or codes or numbers. I just knew how to do it. And that's the part that's kind of like, you know,
And when did you know all that? When did this all develop?
this started developing in 2004 when I was inducted. And my live agent handler was with me all the time, 24/7, nonstop for years. And up until like 2006, when I went to court and had to deal with all that scenario, it still started. The programs had settled in to some degree, but what I've done is rewrite a lot of the programming so that I'm not victimized by the technology anymore. And what I've been doing is researching.
Yeah, but how do you rewrite the programming?
I
How do you
rewrite
do that?
I rewrite it through my own psyche, through higher self, oversoul, superconscious. In other words, if it's not in alignment with the universal codes or universal energies, I break it off and disconnect it.
Now, how do you
And
do that? Now, this is very interesting. For instance, one of the ways of short-circuiting the mind control is you create a dump. Essentially, as soon as this happens, you dump the thought out into like
right,
a sump, uh, for want of a better word. But how do you actually do that? How do you arrange for that within your own mind to actually do that? How do you rewrite codes in your own mind?
well, I do it just by intent, just by canceling type thing, and psychologically and psychically putting it and disconnecting it, and basically recycling it back to the universe, and then just disconnecting it. Period.
Because it's
And that's
very important where you put that thought so it doesn't come back and
yeah.
bite you in the ass.
I used to recycle things by the law of grace back to the universe because it's more
By the law of which?
by the law of grace. In other words, it's more transcendent. It's a way of softly ascending negativity out and recycling it into the universe. But, to me, I mean, that's my way of breaking orbit with negative programming. And it's worked to some extent. And also training, doing my martial arts training and physical training has been very important to me. But also writing and reading and taking the helm with my mind because they were trying to influence it to such an extent with dialogue.
Now, how does physical exercise and those other things you were saying, how does that improve and help somebody, your mind in that respect?
If you're stressed out, which a lot of people, a lot of test subjects and targets get very stressed, they go through a lot of duress through the assault because the synthetic will abuse them. It will physically abuse them, remotely abuse them, verbally, you name it, everything. So there's has to be an outlet. Some people choose drugs, some people choose the wrong thing. I am an athlete. So to me, I went and trained, and it was a way to move and move out and push out a lot of this abusive energy. And they would narrate terrible things to me while I was training back in 2004. I mean, horrible things were said to me, but I kept pushing through it.
Now, what
So
was the
that
purpose of that? Was that so they would be able to check if you could push through?
I think they were trying to break me down. I think they were trying to see what my breaking point was, like how much can she take? And I could take a lot apparently, but I wasn't going to break for them. I was not going to break. So I kept training and I kept my center and I kept going into override mode of overriding their assault program.
Is this similar to like boot camp, where the sergeant major will, you know, inform you of certain things in a way that would make a small boy cry?
Very much so. Yeah, totally. It is. It's like that type of conditioning program. And when I was first inducted in 2004, I was told not to sleep with my husband. I was told I had to sleep in my clothes and that I had to be packed and ready to go at the door. And until this day, I mean, I am still in that red alert sometimes. I still have a hard time resting. I'm still always on the move. I'm always like, even if I move in someplace, I always have my bags packed. That's the program, and I'm trying to still break orbit with that programming. It's a horrible thing, but yeah, they do that, and it is just like the military. There's no doubt about
And
that.
that is there to is that to that's there to continue to grind you down.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, it's a slow death. On some levels, it's a slow bleed. But you learn how to hold your own. The one thing that concerned me the most about all this was the type of tagging system where my body reacts to radio frequencies, it reacts to sounds and things, and I don't have any control over that.
Are there any
And
particular types of radio frequencies or radio signals which are specific to that?
like it's all of them. I've noticed that there's not one type of frequency that it doesn't have some kind of reaction and involvement with. It's like an intelligent signal that responds to everything. I have more so with the music, but
Now, the
everything.
music programming, we're very keen on. We find out in our, as I say, in the pirate radio business, um, the music has been sub-programmed, but the right disc jockeys could de-sub-program them so that you got a positive intention. And for instance, the old form AM radio
Hmm.
seemed to be a very good way of initially working that, but then with the use
Right?
of FM and then digital technologies, there seems to be a higher level of subliminal involved.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But the thing is, what comes to mind is symbiotic connections. It's like an intelligent design, a very covert extraterrestrial type thing, signature. That's what it reminds me of, where it's able to communicate with all sorts of things and sound. Like even if the wind is blowing outside, my electromagnetic field responds to that internally. The signals respond. So it's a really strange thing. And I mean, I don't talk about it a lot because, I've had it since 2000. Just to give you,
And it seems to be much more. It seems like we're dealing with a neural net of an artificial intelligence. You mentioned alien now for the first time.
yeah.
What kind of alien? Interdimensional or extraterrestrial or
Oh,
terrestrial aliens that we don't know about?
right. To me, and I'm going by starseed heritage here. So I'm going by what we are as beings, and we are starseeds. We are celestial beings in this matrix on this planet. I mean, that's my spiritual philosophy, and I'm very clear that we are not our essence of origin is beings. That's my own thing. So for me, I suspect it's extraterrestrial. Black operation stuff that they do in covert technology seems to be a hybridization of stolen technology that they've gotten their hands on that they're interfacing with a type of extraterrestrial where they're creating their own hybrid. And to me, I think they're developing some kind of an extraterrestrial themselves that's
Well,
based
certainly, that's what I've been working on. Essentially, here in England, they call them programmable generated life forms, and it seems to have gone back as far as World War II or further back.
on, believe it.
Uh, why would you believe that? In what
Um,
grounds?
because it's logical. And secondly, they've been doing experimentation with advanced beings for a very long time. And when I say advanced, I mean anybody who's psychic or trained in their own spirituality, that spirit comes from a celestial race. It comes from a type of an extraterrestrial. And that's part of DNA activation. It's based on higher consciousness, DNA activation codes, and then descending that energy down the body, which is basically extraterrestrial. So we are that race. And it's my take that they're extraterrestrials in our soul design and our celestial heritage, which intrigues them, but they want to create their own version to be more like controlled and manipulated and programmable and things like that.
Well,
So,
them sounds as if it ain't us.
no.
What
I mean,
exactly do you mean by them?
I'm talking about balls, the covert technology departments, those people who are involved in those departments, and those people that fund them. So there's certain embodiments of people that are, I believe, are programmed themselves, and so it's kind of like they want to program everybody else because that's how they are. But I don't believe they're extraterrestrials. I believe they're soulless entities that have been programmed to believe they're certain things.
Now, what is a
So
soulless entity exactly?
a soulless entity would be somebody who occupies a physical body, but there's no soul. There's no essence of origin from the universe, and very naked, very void of spirit, incomplete, basically, but programmable by negative thoughts, negative waves of communication to a point where you see all these people these days where they are like that. I mean, they're all there's a lot of driven entities out there, is what I would call them. I mean, people who do this type of stuff, it's really unethical. It's caused a lot of suicide. It's destroyed a lot of lives.
Now, something which I noticed in a particular institution was that they were very keen on generating rage and hate energy. Is that something you were talking about? That
Yeah,
is used for generating the incarnate
right.
soulless beings?
But lowers the vibratory rate for one thing. If you're really expanded in higher consciousness, it's usually about love consciousness. Like they want you angry because that constricts your electromagnetic field in your aura, and it also is put you in a space of their. It's more polarizing with them to a point where they can control you a little better. They always try to push buttons with me, always with the psychotronic programming and the synthetic telepathy and anything. I mean, just it was constant barrage of negative dialogue constantly.
Now, when you're
So
saying negative dialogue, are you talking about people screaming at you, swearing at you, saying obscene things? How does that work?
basically, if I were looking at somebody, they would say something insulting about that person, you know, synthetic. And of course, I would like override in my mind. But the whole thing is like, it's always negative. It's always insulting. It was never anything positive. They never communicate anything positive at all. So, and after a while, that kind of negative reinforcement really just tracks the magnetic field to some degree, unless you're doing your own spiritual work.
But it also makes you generate negative goals for yourself, so you can't start essentially sabotaging your own existence.
True, very true. Yeah, I think you're right about that. And for me, I mean, I kept doing affirmations. I did notice they kept rewriting everything I was trying to say in my mind.
And
So it
how do
was
they do
very
that?
talk. They would interrupt me every time I would quietly talk through telepathy. They would interrupt, and if I was verbally talking, they would interrupt. And it got to the point. I think why I talk so fast now is because I was interfaced to such an extent with an argument that I had to hold my ground and be the one dominating the conversation. That's true. Why do you talk so fast? But I know, it's, yeah, you get communications.
Have you got Irish connections?
And the royal kings somewhere. My sister has done all of our lineage, and yeah, we do have some Irish kings, relatives, and all sorts of cool
And
stuff. So
that might go back to Atlantis, do you think? Any connect?
I'm very connected to Atlantis, so that's something that connects to my celestial spiritual design before these guys showed up in 2004. So I'm very into
I'm
those
very
energies.
interested to get down to who these guys are. I mean, who are the these guys? Explain what they are. Can you give us a full background on that?
Well, I'm just the tip of the iceberg. They're basically victimized just like anybody else, but they have access to the covert technology. We're dealing with somebody in black ops organizations that are military based. They obviously have military, CIA connection, FBI, anything connected to DARPA. All those divisions, to some extent, are involved. It's like many tentacles of a monster. I mean, they all have their own contributing factors to the technology. But then there's the real black budget covert cabal that's doing this and inducting people and programming people and manipulating people.
And what's the what's the point of all this? What's it? What do they want to achieve?
I think I
Oh,
to see
could you do that? Could you say that again?
testing basically to see where people are at and also to see what they can get away with, what the body's capable of doing. So test pilot, I think, is one of the reasons. And second, create their own regime of some kind. Apparently, they want to have a certain amount of people that are programmed and able to. It reminds me of the super soldiers to some extent. You know, indestructible type of entities that will follow without anything, and especially things that are very evil. But you know what I've noticed is that there's a ceiling involved because these guys can only go so far because of their consciousness. In other words, they're not spiritually evolved enough to the level they should be to a point where they'll never ending out of the technology. They're going to be limited by where they're at and their intent to the masses. So,
Okay, could you just tip your? I think your screen's gone up a bit. If you could, if you don't, no, 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 tip the screen down.
right. I
Yeah,
might have
that.
adjusted.
Yeah, that's great. That's a lot better. Great. In fact, if you could tip it just a little bit further down.
Okay. I was adjusting my too. I don't
Yeah,
know.
great. That's getting. But you're lovely. You're wonderful. You're great. That's a wonderful design you've got. Does that have any those wings?
Was my me as a Christmas present from some really close spiritual sisters of mine. So they thought it was me of them. So I guess it was like me, angel, you know, to some extent, but I'm archangel
Looks
these
like a
days. But
wonderful angel or bird or something.
yeah.
Ah, wonderful. Yes.
So I like. So thank you.
So we're sort of in the last section of the first hour. Uh, I think what I want to do is get a good grounding as to exactly who these people are, what their agenda is, and essentially explore who the them is or the they is.
Okay.
So what
Sounds.
do you have any information which would in other words, the people are being targeted? Who are they dealing with? Who are we dealing with? Or
I
what
think
are we dealing with?
I believe we're dealing with people in covert intelligence, and I believe we're dealing with people who are NSA connections. NSA for sure, DARPA for sure, CIA probable because of mind control, and FBI is also notorious for using psychotronic harassment on their targets. So all of these divisions, and they're just the little divisions, but they're all part of the problem and not the solution. And then you have a big black budget where you have a lot of, I don't want to call them elites, but people who have a lot of money to pull and strings and call the shots. So that really the ones who are controlling and manipulated the entire arena. And I don't have exact names, but to me, I can tell you they're just the cabal, a lot of the Rothschild types, the ones that we know have of doing things that are not in alignment with anything with integrity. So
I think some would call them the powers that be.
yeah, possibly. I hate to give them that kind of credibility of powers of anything, but yeah, and there's definitely they can control and manipulate everyone on the planet. And I don't extraterrestrials. These people are people, but they've had technology like the Nazis, and they've taken this technology and they've been running with it like rogue animals.
Now you
And
brought the
what?
Nazis in there. What do you mean, like the Nazis?
So let's just clear it up. Yeah, the Nazis. Period. I mean, we all know that they've stolen archives of data and were obsessed with things based on mysticism. And to some extent, they've misused and converted a lot of that technology to control and manipulate and induct people into their own program.
I mean, in some respects, some people believe, or judging by by certain information, that we've been misled as to who really won World War II. I think the Nazis simply relocated to the States. Is that right? And Britain.
Totally agree with that. Yes, yeah.
Now, why do you agree with that? What do you what?
Well,
Why are you saying that? I'm saying it, but why are you saying it?
that's has evolved technologically. That's one big giveaway. We are a very young country, and yes, we took a lot of their scientists with us over here, and then we started doing the black, covert technology experiments with mind control, and then a lot of other things that were based on covert assault weapon technology. So yeah, totally guilty of that. There's no doubt in my mind that didn't they didn't win the war. In other words, it was staged. To me, I sense it was a stage. It was a front and just another false flag and an excuse to get what they needed to get And they did. So, I mean, look what they're doing right now in the United States. It's almost like a parallel of World War II again, with all these, oh, and people, basically targeted. So it
Now,
looks like
we lost a lot of those words just when the specific names of what you said. Could you repeat that?
yeah, talking about what's going on in the country today. It mirrors World War II. It mirrors the Nazis. A lot of what they're doing with executive orders right now is very concerning because it's enabling them to take away our liberties and our rights and also target those of us who stand up against this oppressive force, which I call the black umbrella in the United States, which is also global. It's not.
Yeah. Black umbrella sounds, it looks very like a giant octopus,
Yeah, yeah,
tendrils going everywhere.
exactly it.
So what are these guys? I mean, what do they do in the morning? Do they get is it they just want a complete? What's the ultimate reason for having complete global mind control? Is it to change the matrix reality or what? I'm thinking the reason why I'm saying that is it's the split beam experiment where if you have the observer effect, how the observer changes reality. So if you have control of the observer, you can then use the observer to manipulate a reality that you want to engineer. Does that make sense?
Total sense. And also, right, that will, they manipulate the realities. And that's another reason if they contain you on a frequency fence and they're using that to control and manipulate your energy field, they're restricting you from ascending to a higher frequency. And that's another part of it. They want to keep you in their lower, I want to call it lower astral, but it's a very low order energetic patterning. And you're right. That's they want as many people to think on their level, which is not consciousness based. It's just a linear form of brainwashing and to a point where they can construct certain things. And we all know we manifest at will our own reality. I mean, with ascension, we're infinite. We can do anything. They don't want that. They don't want liberty. They don't want freedom. So it
So
makes
essentially, because of this, I mean, last week we had a discussion with Mary Rodwell, and the new children are being born with different DNA, and the global education system in the so-called first world countries, so to speak, is shutting these kids down. The education system is specifically designed to prevent these higher ascended children from being able to manifest their higher consciousness. Is there any way? Is this what you're talking about?
yeah, absolutely, yeah. But they're dumb. Manipulate ascension basically. And coincidence that they picked 2012 to start pushing things here in the United States with the NDAA and other things that are designed to infringe on our rights as free
Now,
beings. I
what's the
mean,
NVAK?
AA, in other words, being able to come to your door at 3 o'clock in the morning and take you away and detain you without a lawyer or representation indefinitely, that's not very good. And although I'm in the past like that in a more covert level, it's really in your face now. What they're doing right now is blatant, it's bullying, and it's obvious. And I've been noticing it more and more. And now I'm tagged. I mean, I'm tagged because of what I went through as a covert lab coming forward. That puts me on a more, I guess, a higher risk level to some extent.
So what I want to do shortly, we're coming to the end of the first section. Uh, what I want to do is just let's spend the last few minutes establishing really where we're starting from. What sort of playing field are we on, and what's the game? So where you were tagged in 2004, uh, what was the game that you were exposed to, and who are the players? And then in part two, we'll actually start to see how we can play the game to our advantage.
Okay. Yeah. Do you want me
So
to answer that?
yeah,
Okay. Well, basically, the game itself, pilot lab rat, to see and test out their technology on me to see how it would work, and it worked very well. So that was a success. And insofar as the game playing goes, it's more for remote piloting. It can be used as an assassination program. I could be a Manchurian candidate. I can have handlers in instead of going with the flow of the programming. So that's a different category altogether. Which is a universal extraterrestrial higher consciousness type benchmark, opposed to man's version of, control manipulation.
so they're trying to create a higher level of consciousness, but under a lower level of control.
Correct. And to be honest with you, from where I was at with these guys, they don't like
They don't
God
like what?
spirit. They're very anti-spiritual. They were very anti even God in whatever form you call God, infinite consciousness. They don't like energy. They want to be the God. They want to play God. And these guys operators as God with their man-made low order, communication system. So that's their version. They want to play God on Earth. Is really what it boils down to, and create that. It's just like the movie The Matrix. They create a false matrix where people can live in it and be deceived by it and be so dumbed down and so programmed by it they'll never escape unless those of us like you and I stand up and say, "Wait a minute, that's a false matrix. It's a false reality." So
That's what I called a few years ago. I called it reality management, a reality management system.
very good.
And we
Yeah,
discovered seems that's that the Illuminati started doing that in Ireland to shut down the higher consciousness in Ireland because there was a higher consciousness derived back to a higher spiritually evolved civilization, which we're now discovering, a couple of thousand years ago, which they came and shut down. So this seems to be a long-term game plan, but we're coming to the end. We're in the last few minutes of the first hour, and I think we might even be less than that. So what we'll do is I'm going to put on a cup of tea. If you want to get a cup of coffee, we'll reboot, put the tapes back on, and we'll start the second hour in about 2 or 3 minutes. Okay?
Well, you're so
Right.
sweet.
Okay.